Hi there, I'm Tiffani Bova, speaking to QuickBooks service providers about business continuity through digital transformation. So let me start here. Growth and comfort do not coexist. This is a fantastic quote from the former CEO of IBM, Ginni Rometty. It was actually the opening quote of my book. It was part of a longer statement that she was making about the business, but they had gone at that time some 20 or 21 quarters with no growth. And if you've been paying attention to the news lately, they've just made an announcement they're going to break the company into two after having 28 of the last 33 quarters with no growth. So I'm here to tell you that making hard and big decisions, like splitting your company into divesting or reinvesting in other areas, is really important during this time. But on top of that, we have to learn how to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, because this is not something any of us have navigated in the past. The good news is there's a ton of opportunity. The opportunity to grow your business, to enhance and embrace all the things that your customers now want to do with you. Ultimately, there's so much opportunity on the table. The difficult part is choosing what to do. So hopefully this presentation will give you some ideas about ways in which you can reinvest in areas that you maybe weren't thinking of anymore, or ways in which you can re-engage with your customers. At the end of the day, this is really about finding our way through to the next future and what that might look like. So the world as we know it has completely changed, whether it be personally, on our social, in our business lives, government, everything. There's not one corner of the world that hasn't been impacted by what's going on. But what's also been really inspiring during this time is to see how businesses have pivoted and reimagined themselves and come out bigger and better and stronger through it, both in the way they organize their companies, the products and services that they launch, the way they may start investing in things like software as a service or cloud that they never would have done before. And it's really happening at the SMB level or small and mid business level. That's where we're seeing tremendous innovation happening on a daily basis. Ultimately, this is about what are the things you can do to help your customers and your own company make it through this time. This is what it's all about. But what is driving this? Look, I don't need to tell you all of the digital transformation that's been happening over time, but just to highlight a few. We've been shifting to digital channels over the last decade. So much has accelerated over the last 7 months. We've seen more change and investment here than we saw in the previous 5 years, not only at the enterprise level, but for entrepreneurs and small businesses, doing things that they hadn't imagined they would be doing in 2020, but they needed to in order to remain relevant and stay in front of their customers, servicing them the way they expect to be serviced today. The importance of digital apps. I want to know what's going on in my business in real time. What's happening? How can I communicate with customers faster and better? This is really where cloud plays a role. SaaS is a great way to lean into this, especially because of this rise of digital communication. That's what it's all about, making sure you're communicating with your customers when they need you. But ultimately, it's how do we rethink these digital communities and making digital decisions in real time. The only way you can do that is if you're capturing that data, analyzing that data, taking those insights to share it back with your customers so they can be smarter about their businesses. Really, as service providers, that's what it's all about. It's not only about enhancing and evolving and innovating in your own business, but it's also making sure you're helping to lead your customers where they need to go. We just recently at Salesforce did some SMB research. It's really fantastic. We went out on a global basis. Over 6,000 SMBs were surveyed. We asked them what is top of mind at this time. We found these 3 small business trends. The first one is leaning into customer orientation. Now, what does that mean? Look, we sell products or we sell services, and that's interesting to us. But to customers, it's really about making sure that we're doing things to help their business be better, their business be more agile, and have speed in their business to service the customers that they have. So ultimately, it's about how do we reorient ourselves to not be product-led, but to be customer-led. Because at the end of the day, customers will remember the experience they have with a brand much longer than the price they've paid. Now, usually when I'm in front of people personally and I'm standing on stage, I ask for a show of hands. How many of you have caught an Uber in the last 30 days? Of course, now it's a totally different time. So not only am I not on stage, but you probably are not catching an Uber. But let's remember back to 2019. How many of you have caught an Uber And most everybody's hands go up. And I'll say, how many of you remember if the driver was safely driving, if the music was loud, if the car was smelly? Everybody keeps their hands up. Then I say, okay, how many of you remember the price you paid? Keep your hands up if you do. Almost 85% of the audience, regardless of size, puts their hands down. That means they don't even remember the price they paid, but they remember the experience they had during that drive. That's the kind of thing you have to think about when you're going to reorient yourself to being more customer centric versus being product or service centric, right? They'll say, oh, I really love what this service provider does for my business because they're always there when I call them. And they don't lead with, oh, they're really cheap. Now, they may say along the way that they're affordable, but they're also going to balance it with the way in which you treat them, how they feel when they engage with your brand and your people. And that's because these customer expectations are accelerating. If the habits have changed in the last 7 months is any indication, I don't think we're going to be going back. People want it to be very personal. They want it to be very contextual, but more importantly, they want it to be predictive. Now, what does that mean? So you may have clients that all of a sudden are having exponential growth during this time. You want to be able to predict what they may need next. What other things might they need from you to do? You may even say, look, I have other customers that were of a similar size to you that have also been growing exponentially. And I've been doing these things for them. You may want to consider it because when we did that, their customers had a much better experience. So sharing that insight is really, really important for you to be able to learn from your customers and share with the rest of them. This customer orientation has huge implications to the bottom line, but more importantly, this one stat, 66% of customers expect companies to understand their needs, know what I need next. And the most constraining factors for companies that are SMBs is meeting these customer expectations in the way you sell, in the way you market, in the way you service. Ultimately, this is about trying to satisfy these new expectations all of us as consumers have learned over the last 7 or 8 months. Now, I realize you may be saying, look, I sell to businesses. Yes, you do. But on the other end of that business is a consumer. If you're selling to one person, then they're saying to you, listen, I have all these experiences I have as a consumer that are now lending themselves to what I expect in my B2B life. So these customer expectations are not slowing down. If anything, they are absolutely accelerating. That means we have to change the way we interact with our customers. We have to be much more careful about the communication, the pace in that communication during this time, the tone of the communication during that time. But also they've learned, your customers have learned, and SMBs are saying there's more ways for you to communicate with me versus just via phone or just via email. It may be on social media. It may be doing things like this and having Zoom calls or video calls. Whatever it might be now is the consumer hat is almost on full time, especially if they're still working from home and not back to the office yet. And at the end of the day, this is absolutely about driving flexibility for your customers. That's where SaaS really has the ability for you to be nimble in responding to these new demands that your customers have. And thinking about it as a priority, putting your customer expectations first. Now, let me be clear here. I want you to deliver compelling and meaningful experiences to your customers, but not at the sacrifice of your employees. You have to make sure your employees have everything they need in order to service your customers. They have to have a good experience too, using the tools they have at their disposal when your customers call in. So ultimately, this is a two sides to the same coin. One is making sure your employees have everything they need to be successful so that in turn they can serve your customers. The second is accelerated digitization. Now, prior to joining Salesforce, I was a research fellow at Gartner for a decade. And I can tell you that this acceleration of digitizing the business has not been slowing down, but in the last 8 or 9 months, it's accelerated at a pace I've never seen. I've been selling technology now for almost 25 years. I was very, very early in the SaaS movement and the infrastructure as a service movement. I was a sales, marketing, and customer service leader for the largest web hosting company in the US back in 2000 to 2004. I was the beta client for Eloqua in Constant Contact. I feel like I've been having this conversation for quite a while. especially to service providers, to the channels that serve the customers on behalf of vendors like QuickBooks. So ultimately, what's really great to see is that it's not just about digitizing the back office, but we're now starting to see digitizing of the front office, the way in which you can service your customers better. So while I know this is about what are the things you can do for your customers and using these new tools, it's also for me about how can you improve the way you run your business. And that's really where this comes into play. This quote is one that gets a lot of comments, that we don't have a technology problem, we have a people process problem. Now, let me be clear what I mean here. It is the fact that technology has huge capabilities. Are you using all of it? Are your processes supporting the fact that technology now can do these amazing things in real time, maybe with no human interaction? It's not removing the human, it's human and technology, but that's really being driven by the processes. It's also being driven by making sure that your people are trained and enabled and capable to use all the power that technology now has at its disposal. So it isn't that technology isn't important. It's that when a customer comes to me and says, I really want to do this, I'm like, well, Salesforce can do that. And you may also have the same thing in your business. Well, we want to do that. Well, QuickBooks can do that too. It's, do they know they have that capability? Are they using it? Are there people trained on it? So that's what I mean by we don't have a technology problem. If we knew all that we were capable to do on all of these software apps and software as a service apps, imagine what would be possible for your customers. But also you have to remember it's about your people too. So now high performers are more likely to automate these repetitive tasks, similar to what I was just saying, in the sense that this is not about technology replacing humans, but this is about humans and technology delivering what needs to happen for customers. 51% are more likely to automate sales data and customer notes logging, so that when you're working with customers, you don't have to worry about what's happening on the customer side if you want to go and peek in on an account. But you have to make sure that that data is making its way in. And so is there a way to automate it? Can you take an email and just drop it right into your system? Can you take a transaction that happened and drop it right into being able to send out a receipt, or even providing a quote and then all the way to cash? At the end of the day, it's how do we automate those things so that people can focus on what's important, servicing the customers. 113% are more likely to automate lead and opportunity prioritization to help you manage your business. How do you make sure that you're responding to all this inbound activity that's coming from prospects, but also from existing customers? Like, I have a question for my accountant and it takes them 4 days to get back to me, or I have a really pressing need because I'm refinancing my house. Exactly an example from last week. I had to get my last year tax return. So I had to reach out to my tax accountant and ask. It took 3 days for them to respond to me. And so wouldn't it be great if there was some way to recognize that email, notice what it's asking for, and have an automated task to go and respond back and say, we'll get back to you. Even if it's we'll get back to you in 24 hours, I still would have felt like someone heard me and they were working on it. So you just need to think, how can I use that technology to provide better service to your customers? 132% are more likely to automate account action determination than underperformance. Meaning, what's the next best action? What's the next best thing you could do for your customer to make sure that you always stay front and center with valuable insights? It could be, it's tax time. Are you filing quarterly? Here's some advice. Here's some tips and tricks. Here's a newsletter. Whatever it might be is anticipating and predicting, as I had said a few minutes ago, what is going to be needed next from your customers. This acceleration of SMB digitization is really due to the pandemic, but I'll tell you that SMBs are the tip of the spear of innovating much faster than large enterprises because they have the nimbleness. They have the ability to change on the dime. The hardest thing to do when they make those adjustments is absolutely in the people and process side. So thinking about if you're going to be a high growth SMB yourself, and you're going to help your customers be high growth SMBs, it's really about thinking more differently about how to use technology. Software as a service is one of those things over the last 15 years or so that has really been one that small businesses have either said, nope, I'm absolutely against it because I don't understand it. But I think now, over the last 9 months, if they didn't understand it, they understand now the power of being able to digitally connect with their customers. right? That if you can't visit people face to face, it's really important to make sure that you're still able to do that. So getting your small and mid-business customers to invest in SaaS is a great way for them to have more control over their own business, especially if they still have people working from home. And this influence of technology on SMB operations is really, really important. And a lot of that is because the high growth companies have fully embraced technology. Those that are in, sort of flat growth or are stagnating have been absolutely pushing back. So during this time, I use sort of restaurants as a great example because it's non-controversial, right? But if you think about it, restaurants who didn't have their menu online, didn't have the ability to order through Uber Eats or Grubhub, didn't have the ability to do curbside pickup, had zero takeout business ahead of time, had a very robust dinner menu, and a robust dinner crowd. Let's just say that I showed up every Thursday to have dinner. That's great. But now all of a sudden, you don't know who I am. So you can't send me a message and say, hey, Tiffani, we know you come every Thursday. We'd love to see if you'd like us to send you dinner. Would you like to order your regular? What kind of amazing experience would that be, right? Know me, communicate with me, proactively reach out, have it be personalized. You know what I normally order. You knew my name. Now, for those restaurants that were prepared to have that kind of capability pre-pandemic, we're in a much better situation than those that were not. Those that were not, whether it be any retail store, we're scrambling to figure out, how do I get online and do e-commerce? How do I actually accept online payment? How do I deliver and ship? How do I do curbside pickup, right? That's all about thinking differently about how you use technology. And it should be driving those customer interactions. Should be influencing your organization's ability to stay open and in business. It drives growth of your existing customer base and your customers' customer base, and it drives employee productivity. They have everything they need. Imagine they could reach out, and even those hostesses that were, welcoming me every Thursday night could be the ones that are doing those emails. And now I know them, they know me. What an amazing way to keep people working. So this is why digital is so important, and this acceleration is not going to slow down. So that gets me to the third one, being prepared for the future. Look, there's so many things that we spend time on in the business: the money, the P&L, cost of goods sold, all of those kinds of things. But really scenario planning, what ifs? What if we stay working from home for the next 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months? What if your customers do the same thing? What if they can't come visit you when they need things? What if your customers can't visit them during tax season? Maybe everything has to push online. Knowing that that's going to be happening, I would be saying, how do I prepare my customers for the inevitable of next April? It's tax time. Should we start preparing ourselves for that? And can we help them prepare themselves? This is about making sure we put the same level of rigor into the selling and servicing side of our business as we do in the rest of our business. So this is the top 3 ways in this particular vertical to drive company growth over the next 12 months. One is expanding into key accounts when it comes to financial services. And I could not be more bullish on this. I believe growth this year and next year is going to be far more about selling more into your base of customers than potentially your ability to find a lot more net new customers. Now, the one caveat I do to that, considering what business you're in, is that you may be able to acquire a lot more new customers, considering the fact that so many companies are now going online and driving e-commerce and need that SaaS capability because all the workers, most of the workers are working remotely and are distributed. So this could absolutely be a time for you to do both, not only sell into the base, but go and acquire net new customers. Furthermore, you may be able to expand into new verticals. So what vertical are you really good at? Are you good at dentist's office? Are you good at insurance agencies? Are you good at retail storefronts? Are you good at restaurants? Whatever it might be, how do you take those lessons learned and shift yourself into another industry or vertical? And if you might say to me, I don't have a vertical expertise, or I don't mind if I have 15 different verticals I'm focused on. My only caveat back to you is that all those insights you gather from the bulk of the industries you're in is where you can glean those absolutely personalized, predictive insights you can share with the rest of the customers that are in the same vertical. This isn't about sharing the secret sauce or things that are under NDA, obviously, or going against compliancy or any of that. This is about just saying from a trends perspective, this is what you're seeing in the restaurant industry or in the financial services industry or in the healthcare industry, whichever it is. That's where you really can show the value beyond the fact that you are delivering software as a service and financial service needs. The third is expanding your routes to market. Did you only sell face-to-face? Can you now sell virtually? Can you now sell via video? You used to do maybe quarterly reviews with your clients face-to-face in your office or in their office. How do you set that up over video? Do you record it? Do you let them know you're recording it? Do you share the recording with them after so they have a copy of it? Do you create a shared folder online where they can see all their information in one place, including recordings of your conversations? How can you reimagine using technology, especially SaaS, in order to expand the way in which you serve your customers? So ultimately, it's just endless to the amount of data that we have. You can see on the bottom of this slide, the location where you can actually use the Tableau data set, and you can slice and dice the data in any direction you want, size company, vertical, industry, etc. So you can really see what's important to your customers and what you should be focused on. So this future preparation doesn't start there. Maybe we have to think about, maybe it gets better in 6 months and 2 years from now, it comes back again. Thinking about that scenario planning of always having in the back of your mind, look, if my people have to work from home for now and they go back to work, and we have to close down again and they go back to home, how do you handle that, right? It's really a kind of threefold. We found that you have to help your customers stabilize the business during a time of crisis, and that may look different for lots of you. It could be just reaching out and saying, how are you doing? What can I do? And it has nothing to do what you do for them as a business. It could be, making sure that they're okay and there aren't other things that they may need. Could you connect them with other people in your communities to give them the help they need outside of your capability? It's really being there as a community. And so thinking that way. The second is helping your customers get back to work or get back to the office, depending on what industry you're in. Ultimately, it could be, can I get people back up and running quickly because now they're using SaaS? Can I get them starting to do collections and sending out bills in real time instead of waiting until somebody has to go to the office for 2 hours on a Monday because of the city and state regulations? And so ultimately, this is about your ability to understand how to navigate it. The third is absolutely the most important, getting back to growth. How do you get back to growth? But how do you help your customers get back to growth? And adopting technology, if you've heard anything today, right, is not just about selling SaaS and a SaaS-based solution, but using the technology in your own business that's available to you and helping your customers understand the business value of SaaS, the flexibility and agility and things that it gives them during this time to be digital versus absolutely to not be digital and being in an analog world when we absolutely are not there anymore. And I don't expect that we're going to go back. So this is the technology. This is the technology that supports the growth. Look, I get it. It's not lost on me. I work at Salesforce, but it's not about that. Look, it's about what do customers want from us as a business who serves other businesses and consumers. That's how you have to think about it. So email marketing, how am I communicating with my customers? At what pace? With what tone? What happens if they send me an email? How do I capture that? Like I gave you the example of sending a note to my tax accountant because I needed a copy of my tax returns because I only had the hard copy. I didn't have the digital copy. And so that email, how do you manage that? The next is customer service. I have a problem. I'm not able to do something in my SaaS tool. I'm not able to figure out how do I do this in QuickBooks? What are the things I should be thinking about? That's really where you have to have somebody focused on customer service. And I guarantee you that is a real-time now 24/7. Now, I'm not saying you have to have a human answer 24/7, going back to what I said before, thinking about the process differently and how can you maximize the technology you have to even just respond to your customers to say, I'll get back to you at another time. Tomorrow, 24 hours, 48 hours, Monday through Friday, whatever the communication is. Look, customers just want to know you got the email and when can I expect to hear back from you? And then thinking about projects you have and collaboration tools and ways to engage with your internal teams to serve your customers better. How do you help your customers actually conduct commerce? in their business. Capture that cash, get it into QuickBooks. What are the things you need to do in order to bring that entire 360 view of what's going on in that customer? And then last, really this marketing automation, thinking differently about how do I automate some of this communication to my customers, since I can't be on all the time. It's just not possible, right? So at the end of the day, how can you use all this technology to just be better? So now thinking differently about moving forward, I personally don't like the term new normal because I feel like the normal we left was not always equal for everybody. But how do we point the way forward, right? At the end of the day, sales leaders are saying, I want these 5 things. So maybe you are the sales leader, right? You are the one who goes out and finds the new customers. But what's happening is this increased flexibility. Is it voice? Is it email? Is it a video? Improve data quality. Do I know what they asked me the last time? Do I have information and access to what we talked about and what the to-dos were the last time we spoke so I can hit those right away? Simplifying the sales process and removing the friction during the time in which you're trying to promote and inspire them to use something like QuickBooks or to even embrace software as a service or cloud solutions. But always making sure you have a personalized outreach. I can't tell you how frustrating it is for me to get an email and it's like, dear John. I'm like, well, not even close, right? And so that means that you didn't care enough about your customer to either use the right technology to not let that ever happen, or maybe there's something wrong in the process, or maybe it was a people mistake. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. You just don't want to always have it happen. And you don't want to have it happen at scale across all your customers, where maybe the system was just one name off and everyone got everyone's name before them in your system. That's really what I mean by personalizing this outreach. And then really thinking differently about this cross-functional partnership between you and the remainder of your company. So if you are the owner and you have other people who work for you, how do you collaborate with them? If they're servicing your customers as well, how do you capture their conversations? So when you have a conversation with your customer, you absolutely can see all that information in one place. Once again, high performers are not only digitizing the back office and transforming the way they engage, sell, market, and support their customers, but they're doing it at the employee level as well, because the employees are the ones that deliver that service day in and day out. Now, if you agree with some of what I said, all of what I said, if you found it somewhat fascinating that this new SMB research that's about 60 days old, ultimately, then I'm going to say, now we have to say, how do you do it? How do I actually execute on some of those ideas and concepts you just ran through? Well, I'm going to start here. For those of you who've been doing this for a long time, I could tell you that in the 90s, a customer would call or leave us a voicemail, and we would respond back in a very reactive manner. We move forward to that to become more proactive. The example I often use is I used to run a call center for a web hosting company, as I mentioned, and we would have a spike on churn at the end of the month. And we couldn't figure out what it was. Lo and behold, what was it? People's credit cards were expiring, and we weren't catching it until the customer called us and said, my service is down. I don't have access to email, and my website is down. And so we would capture their new credit card information and we would turn everything back on. But we said, wait a second, how do we proactively actually stop that from happening in the first place? So we pulled a report, everyone's credit cards who were going to expire within the next 90 days. We actually went out and grabbed them, sent them an email and said, your credit card's going to expire before your next renewal. We don't want service to be interrupted. Lo and behold, we cut the churn rate by almost 80%. And so we didn't have to go and win back customers. And if you're in the SaaS business, what I just described to you is your reality. You want to always stay on top of, especially in a recurring revenue business, the way in which your customers are paying you. So that's an example for proactive. Now we've moved to this predictive, which I've mentioned a number of times, but this is about people who did this also did that. Now, how do I find more people that look like that and give them a very similar experience? So you have to figure out, how do I become more adaptable and personalized as the channel partner, as the service provider, as the solution provider that's delivering the technology that's powering your customer's business day in and day out. It really is, how do you help them see through all the opportunity that technology and SaaS specifically will give them? But you have to break down the silos. Look, it's not it's not something that I take lightly, that, silos are important, but we want to make sure we can thread communication between them. What I mean by that is if you have parts of your company that does sales or marketing or service, or you have people who, are actually delivering the technology at the field level, and then you have inside managers and you have, people who are doing other kinds of functions. How do you keep them all aligned, right? How do you keep them all going in the same direction? That's what's really important here, thinking about ways in which you can break down those silos. One way I've seen be really, really successful over the last 15 years is really minimizing the metrics and aligning them going into the same direction. So for example, sales has one metric, customer service has another metric, deployment and engineering has another metric, your executives have another metric, and no one is rowing in the same direction. Find one metric in which you can share across the board so that everybody realizes and understands how their role plays a part in the service you're delivering to your customers. Because if you don't do those two things, at the end of the day, hands down, no question, your customers will have a very disconnected experience. Now, what do I mean there? What I mean there is when they talk to someone over here in your company, they talk to someone in another department in your company, and as someone in another department in your company, and they feel like they were dealing with 3 different companies. That's what I mean by a disconnected experience. You have to find a way to align those things. And so thinking about that is balancing sort of process and autonomy, right? Giving your sellers, giving your customer service people the autonomy to do what's right for your customers, even if you don't have a metric that's tracking it, right? You want to make sure that they are delivering at the end of the day what's important to the customer, not what's important to the metric or the productivity metric. Ultimately making sure that they're pivoting towards becoming more customer centric and not just being very product or service centric. And when you think about that, it really enables and empowers your people to do what's best. And I've said that a number of times. I'm actually going to be launching, or I will have launched some research that talks about the power of employee experience and customer experience driving greater growth in companies. Should keep an eye out for it because it's really, really compelling findings. And it's really being driven by this, balancing this process and autonomy, giving your people the power to do what's right for the customer. And that is this collaboration loop. That is thinking across the teams that touch your customers, across the entire organization. It doesn't matter. It could be someone in legal, could be someone in finance, could be someone in customer service or sales or marketing. What are the things they need to do in order to serve your customers at the best at every touch point? Now, I know I'm bouncing between what you guys should be doing in your own business and how you can really help and enable your customers to do the same in theirs. But this kind of conversation is what small businesses are looking for from their service providers, even if it's outside of your sort of, industry. Really asking them, what are they grappling with? What is top of mind for them? What are they trying to do today? How are they prepared? What things have really impacted their business? And then looking across the network that you have, how can you help them? Collaboration comes in many, many forms, not just internal. It's about really driving it. So the fastest way to get a customer to love your brand is to get your employees to love their job. If they show up every day and they know that you are fighting for them, that you're fighting to make sure they have everything they need to be successful, they have all the tools and systems, everything that they may need, they'll show up with a much better attitude than, it's so difficult to service the customers. Your customers will feel that. Invest in your people, your customers will be happy. If your people are happy and your customers are happy, you will grow. If you grow, you can invest more in your people. You can start to hire more people. You can expand into new verticals and markets. You can share the goodness that you have going today with more people around you. So for me, growth is a thinking game. This image to the right comes from my book, Growth IQ, and really talking about ways in which businesses are growing today. And I'm not going to go through any of these actually at this moment. I just wanted you to see that those are the 10 ways, no matter what, that customers are able to grow. But this is the highlights from the book. Start with a beginner's mind. I've given you a ton of information over the last 40 or 45 minutes. And I'll tell you that I just want you to give me 10% space, 5% space to consider at least one thing I said. The worst thing you could do is have inertia, that you tried it before and it didn't work. It's not the culture of your business. Maybe you just don't agree with it. All of those things may be true, but I'm more interested to know what your customers think. So you have to listen to your customers and your employees because they have the answer to what you're dealing with today. What should you be doing? Ask your customers. My CEO, Mark Benioff, around the April timeframe, gave us a challenge: 1 million conversations with our customers. And that's what we did. We actually had 1.5 million conversations from 55,000 employees. And I'll tell you what we've gleaned and learned from those conversations is we've launched multiple new products to try to satisfy this situation that we're in right now and to help our customers not only get out of it, but succeed and grow out of it into the future. So listening to your customers and employees is super important. The other thing I'd say that's counterintuitive is don't chase your perceived competition. Look, you're the only one that has your culture, your people, your brand, your customer base. You're it. You can learn from others, you can pay attention, but don't completely chase the competition and do what they do. You have to find your why. You have to find what makes you unique, and that's where you want to double down. And then not being afraid of technology. You have to embrace it. There's many, many industries out there that still are very reticent to bringing technology into their company for all kinds of reasons. They feel it'll push people to lose their jobs. It might be overwhelming. It's not the right culture. But I think now, right, with all the habits changing during this pandemic, that we've become much more socially connected in a digital way, even if we are physically separated. I think the habits and the expectations and the willingness to try technology is a great opportunity for you to capitalize that in a way that brings value to your customer's business. And then your differentiation is going to be your mental model, how you do things, how you do it. How do you serve them? How do you email them? How do you call them? How do you engage them? How do you provide them a yearly review or a quarterly review? How you do it is your secret sauce. That's why I say don't copy your competition, because you may see on the surface what they do, but you don't see on the inside what they do. And that's really where they are competitively ahead if you don't know what that is. So focus in on yourself and then ultimately rally around the customer. Rally around the customer that you know you have now. Maybe challenge your team to do what we did. Go have 1,000 conversations or 500 conversations or 50 conversations, whatever that number is. Ask your team to come up with 5 or 10 or 15 new ideas of what your company could be doing right now to grow your business. Take all of them, have everyone present it. Nobody has a bad idea, right? And then maybe you'll find some new things you could be doing. And that's really where this goes, empowering each other. And ultimately, to lend myself to the QuickBooks statement for this event is we go further together, right? How do we pull everything together for our people and for our customers? And how do we ask better questions and listen more so that we can find our way forward together? So with that, here's some ways to continue to boost your growth IQ and hear more from the research that we've done. You can find it here at salesforce.com/research. You can tune into my podcast, What's Next. I get the awesome opportunity to interview some amazing people. It's on most of the podcast platforms. And then that is a copy of my US book cover, Growth IQ. It's now been translated into 10 languages. So she is making her way around the globe, even though I am grounded. But it has absolutely been a pleasure to be here with you today at the QuickBooks Solution Provider Summit. I really appreciate your time and attention. I hope you found it valuable, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you and hearing from you in the future. My name is Tiffani Bova. I am the Growth Evangelist at Salesforce, and thank you for your time.